Library's Our Story series about Wiley Oakley, the legendary storyteller. Give each other applause for coming and making it. Excellent. What a turnout. We greatly appreciate your support. Our local historian for Wiley Oakley is Lew Bolton from Jack Tales. He is going to do interpretation, storytelling about as Wiley Oakley to tell his story. And we are very, very excited about this. This has been amazing. This is actually the biggest audience we've had at 68 people attending. This is amazing. And yes, another round of applause really quick. Thank you so much. And to be quick, so that way I won't take any more time. A quick synopsis of our story series is that we're here to celebrate Appalachian heritage, the history of Gatlinburg, and how the library serves it. And we actually, sorry, my brain's going 80 miles per hour. Sorry, take a breath. All right. Our next presentation is actually going to be on Tuesday, October 21st with Les Williams about the Methodist in Minot Park, and we're very excited about that. Without further ado, we're going to have Lew Bolton take over for his program. Lew?
Let's hear some music first. We got some musicians. Let's hear
let's hear some music first.
On top of old Smoky
Penny
music.
Yes. Penny and Luke Ellis are going to do some music. Thank you.
My grandfather roamed in search of his mother. So far from his home. He climbed up the Smokies. To its highest peak. But he never found her. 'Cause she was at peace. Long after God called him. And grandmother too. Folks say he still roams there. I don't think that's true. 'Cause above the Smokies. The reunion is grand. A boy found his mother. And now holds her hand. And again holds his hand. I wrote that myself. Really? I wrote that myself.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Some of the Wiley Oakley kin now is going to tell you about something that's going on with the city commissioners in Gatlinburg. So we got 3 people over there who are going to tell you a little bit about what's going on with that. We don't know whether the resolution we're proposing will work, will be passed or not. But right now, this is a little bit a taste of what's on it.
And we would like to read a few short excerpts.
Before you do that, I'm going to give you a mic so that way our recording does it. Yeah, we can pass it along. No, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll just hold it.
A proposal has been submitted to the Gatlinburg City Commission. We'd like to read a few short excerpts.
Whereas Wiley Manson Oakley was native born in the Smoky Mountains at the foot of Mount Uncut on September 12, 1885.
And he moved to Gatlinburg around 1925 and contributed to this area until his death on November 18th, 1954.
A proposal has been... Wait, that's the same thing.
Yeah, flip the page.
Whereas Wiley Oakley, knowledgeable in all things Smoky Mountain, was the expert guide for politicians, naturalists, botanists, and other scientists.
And eventually, Wiley helped to lay out the boundaries of the national park.
And the park awarded Wiley Oakley with the first badge as the #1 guide in the Smokies.
Whereas Wiley Oakley, an affable, genuine mountain man, became a legend in his own time.
And renowned journalist Ernie Pyle wrote, "The famous man in the Smokies, as far as visitors are concerned, is Wiley Oakley."
Wiley is a natural woodsman with a soul that sings in harmony with the birds and the trees and the clouds.
Whereas J. Percy Priest, U.S. House of Representatives, declared at the original dedication of Wiley's memorial plaque to the memory of one who was and is the living spirit of the Great Smoky Mountains.
Now, therefore, the officials of Gatlinburg proclaim the date of Wiley's birth, the 12th day of September, as Wiley Oakley Day in Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
This proposal will be considered by the commissioners and voted on in due process. We hope you guys take consideration in what we're asking for. Well, without further ado, here's Wiley.
Oh, I'm going up to the mountain, Chimney's campground. Gonna get some mountain air. Here I am, roaming man, Wiley Oakley. Well, welcome everybody and howdy. Can you say howdy to me? Howdy. Oh, what a friendly group. That's so good to hear. Well, welcome tonight. I hear that you want to hear some stories. Is that right? Okay. Well, I want to tell you some stories. I want to tell you some true stories that happened in my life, and I want to tell you some tall tales, if you can handle it. Okay, you're going to have to figure out which is which, though, I'm afraid. So, in thinking about all these things that we're going to do here tonight, I'm going to just get started right away, if that's all right with you, because we're running a little bit behind. And I'm going to tell you about a time when it was the autumn here in the Smoky Mountains, and I was just yearning to get up to the autumn in the Smoky Mountains. But I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license, and I couldn't drive. So I went to a service station right here in Gatlinburg, and my cousin Fred Oakley, he was working there, and I caught his eye, and he saw me, and he knew what I wanted. So when he could take a break, he came out, and we got in the car, and we started driving up towards the Smokies, leaving Gatlinburg behind. But you know, Gatlinburg's been pretty good to the mountaineers around here. They sometimes call us hillbillies, but that's okay because the tourists, well, they provide the money during the summer. We live off of them in the summer, and in the wintertime, we live off of taters. So we're glad that the tourists are coming. But as we drove on up past Sugarlands, we finally got to a place called the Chimneys Campground. And I helped to build that, by the way. And we went in that campground. I really like this campground. I like to guide people there. And the bears like it too. You can well imagine. And one time I saw, it was five bears at that campground. And there was four of them that was whole bears. And there was one that was a half a bear. So now the whole bears, you can well imagine, you know, they had everything. They had the claws, they had the paws, they had the teeth, they had their hairy chest, they had the little tail back there and everything. Four whole bears. Next part's a little sad. I don't know if you can take it. But the half a bear, well, it was just the bottom half. And that bottom half was sticking out of a garbage can. 4.5 bears. Oh my Lord. Well, we kept on driving in the chimneys there, and we got as far as we could go, and Fred stopped the car, and I got out the car and walked away, and oh, it was so good to be up in the Smoky Mountains in the autumn time. And I was glad to be there because it's the air. It's such pure air that's fit to breathe up there in the Smokies. And the beauty of the Smokies is up there too. But I noticed that the car was still running. So I said, "Hey, Fred, you can go on now. I'll be all right." He was worried about me because I've been a little sickly. So finally, he turned around and went on back toward Gatlinburg. So that left me there in the Smoky Mountains, and I laid down on the ground on a bed of colored autumn leaves and just breathed in that air and saw the clouds rolling by and heard the wrens in the trees. And I could watch those leaves just fluttering up in the trees there. It was such a beautiful day. And I was thinking, you know, in this whole wide world, of all the choicest places, I was born at the foot of Mount LeConte. And I lived in the Smokies all my life. even before the park was thought of. Oh, what a blessing. Can you just imagine that? Before the park and all the people came, just me rumbling and rambling, that's what I like to do. So it was a blessing living here in these Smoky Mountains. And not only that, but it gave me lots of stories to tell. So I thought I'd tell a few little short ones. The first one that I can recall that really stands up in my mind was one time there was a group of us, I think about 4 or 5 boys, and I was under 8 years old at that time, and we was in the woods, and in the woods we was doing popping coals. So you get a hot coal from the fire, you put it on a rock, spit on the rock, put the coal on there, and you take a hammer and pow, and sparks would fly everywhere. Guess what happened? Fire. We started a fire, a wildfire. It was just getting bigger and bigger, and I got trapped in that wildfire. And so I had to start running to try to get away from that fire. Well, I was running and running. I saw this old holler log. So I climbed in that holler log, and then I took my hat and I put it over my face so I could sort of siphon the air out, so I could breathe. And it just so happened that I could have been a cinder by the next morning, but I survived. And the reason I survived was because that was a chestnut tree. And chestnut trees, or that log was a chestnut tree, have acid in them. And it was that acid that saved my life. So I was happy about that. And what else? I was always running away, running off. And one time, little old me, just a little over 8 years old probably, I crossed the Smoky Mountains by myself, over the mountains, down to North Carolina to visit my Cherokee kin. My mother's sister lived over there. And so I went all the way over there, and it's amazing that I made it, but I did. And now my mother and her sister, their mother was the original Cherokee bloodline, and they had about a quarter Cherokee in them, and I was just touched with a little Cherokee blood. And my mother's name was Elmina, excuse me, Elmina. And oh, I miss my mama even today. I really do. I can remember when my dad would be coming into my bedroom at night sometimes, and he'd say, "Wiley, what's wrong?" And my pillow was soaked with tears. And I said, "I don't know." But I knew exactly what it was. It's my mother. Well, I had a real good visit there with the Cherokee kin. Stayed about a month before my daddy found out I was gone and sent for me to come back. And we went out in the woods, and the Cherokee told me all sorts of things that I didn't know at all. Told me about hunting things that I didn't know and all that. So it was a great experience. And we'd eat wild game at night and sit around the fire and tell stories. We got a storyteller here tonight. These were the real stories, that the Cherokee was passing on about the creation and all of that. What an experience. So that was one thing that happened back then. What else? Oh, yes. I think I will tell you that one. Oh, my. It was summertime. Yeah, I'll tell you the summertime story. Now, in the summertime, we didn't wear no shoes, Sometimes we didn't even have shoes. And my feet got so tough in the mountains. My feet were so tough that I could crush one of those chestnut burrs, crack it open, and it wouldn't even hurt my feet. You know what a chestnut burr is? Well, this is a dried one. And as you can see, it's pretty prickly. If you imagine a porcupine about the size of a little small bird's egg, that's what I'm talking about. And those chestnuts roasting on an open fire, you know what's inside. Well, I could bust one open, it wouldn't hurt my feet at all. Well, I was walking down the trail one day. I was going to see some of my buddies. We were going to go swimming, and it was a hot summer day. And I think these were some of the same boys that was in the woods with me when we caught that fire thing going. I think so. Well, I rounded the trail, and I stepped on something soft. I looked down. It was a rattlesnake. Oh my gosh, that rattlesnake did not like being stepped on for some reason. And oh, he got mad at me and he struck at my heel. And that rattlesnake was sorry because he was snaggletooth for the rest of his life. But he didn't live very long because I stomped on him and killed him dead at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I counted, and that rattlesnake had 28 rattlers on it, 28 and a button. So it was an old snake. Well, I went on down the trail towards my friends because it was getting hotter and hotter, and I wanted to get in that water as soon as I could. And then I started thinking, I got a story here, and I could tell my buddies. They wouldn't believe me. They'd say, "Oh, wow, you're always exaggerating. You're always telling whoppers. We ain't going to believe none of that." I needed proof. And proof is, with moonshine, you got to have proof or it's just water. So I went back to where that snake was, and there it was, a line in the road. And I took out my Barlow knife, and I hacked off that rattlesnake's rattlers. Well, that snake started jumping around and striking at me, terrible. So I stomped on it and killed it also. And then I looked up the trail. Oh my. And there was the first snake that I killed. Because I thought something was strange the way he was still living there. Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? Neither one of them snakes could rattle their rattlers anymore. And I bet they couldn't yodel. A little lady ho, a little lady ho, a little lady yodel. You know what that yodeling means? That means if I tell you a tall tale or a whopper, it means that you can believe it or not. Well, don't believe that story. Next one you can. I tried my hand at moonshining one time with my buddy Birdwell. And we started trying setting up a still and all, but I give it up because I was scared. I was afraid that the law would come in and they'd arrest me and put me in jail, and I couldn't be cooped up in a jail at all. So I gave it up. And for years and years, I never touched a drop till one year a tourist. He heard me say that I had a frog in my throat. So he brought me some moonshine, said to try it to see if it helped. So I tried a gulp of that moonshine, and ooh, it burned. And oh my gosh, it was awful tasting, Lord. So I took the rest of that moonshine, and I had some sugar bites, and they were itching like crazy. So I poured some of that moonshine on it, and they quit biting me. I think they got drunk and fell off my arm. Well, what else? Well, one time, I kept roaming a lot, and I decided, well, maybe I need to settle down. Maybe I need to find a girl to do some courting or something like that. And so I decided that I would just see if I couldn't find a gal to do some courting. And guess what? Oh, frog, you went a courting and a heated ride. Frog, you went a courting and a heated ride. Hey, 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 hey. Frog, you went a courting and a heated ride with a bunch of wildflowers by his side. Well, I found a local gal and I liked her a lot. We started courting, and one night her parents invited me for supper. I think they wanted to check me out to see if I was any kind of a feller to hang around with their gal, So I headed for the cabin where they lived, and I walked along, and I hear a sound behind me. It was the wind getting up. It was the whistling, like. Can you make that sound? Yeah, do it several times. Give me some sound back there. Yes. And I'm getting chilly already from that. Thank you. Well, I kept on walking, and I hear these big old owls up in the trees, and I heard one of them just making lots of sounds up there, raising some ruckus. And then I heard another owl, one of those big horned owls, and I thought of a saying that the mountain people has for a saying. And that if these birds is making all that noise, if these owls is raising ruckus like that, it means bad weather's on the way. And sure enough, that wind sound get lots of louder. Let's hear it loud. Ooh, ooh. Oh my gosh, we got some windy people in here tonight. Well, so I kept on walking towards the cabin, and I finally got there. There was a little drops of snow coming down by that time, and they was big flakes. They really was. And I got to that cabin. Now, the cabin was called the Bud Ogle Cabin. Anybody ever seen the Bud Ogle Cabin? You know, there's right outside Gatlinburg. Sure is. Beautiful old mountain cabin. And you know, it's one they called a saddlebag type of cabin. It's got a bin on one side, a cabin bin on one side, and a cabin bin on the other. And in the middle, there's a chimney. And that chimney serves as a chimney for both sides. It was an unusual thing to have here in the Smoky Mountains. But Bubby Ogle built that. The left side was for sleeping. The right side was for eating and cooking. Well, when I got to the porch, it had snowed a little bit, so I had to stomp the snow off my feet on the porch there, knocked on the door, and they let me in. And just about that time, it seemed like a storm hit. Lots of wind. Woo! And it was getting colder, and the snow was coming down. Great big old flake. Keep it going, keep it going. Lots of, and it looked like a storm was coming through, and that wind was not blowing down. It was blowing sideways. It was blowing so fast. Well, we got inside, and it didn't sound quite as windy as it did. We had our supper, and after supper, Mr. Ogle, he said to me, Wiley, now, Wiley, I don't think your daddy would want you to try to get home in this weather. It's dangerous. You better spend the night here. And that suited me fine to be around Rebecca some more. So we went to bed. Now, the house was pretty well full already. Upstairs in the loft, there was the four boys, the four brothers, Rebecca. Rebecca's the gal that I was trying to see there. And those beds were full. And in the bedroom, 2 beds, but there was 3 in already. So they threw me a pallet on the floor. Now, if you know that cabin, there's a wall that if you look out, there's a long window there, and you can see the barn. That's where we put the pallet that night. And, of course, we couldn't see that night because there was so much snow coming in. But they gave me the pallet, and they gave me some nice quilts. What's that fancy kind of quilt they have in the Smokies? What? Patchwork? That's what there was. Beautiful patchwork quilts. So I had those quilts to help me get warm that night. Well, I got in bed, and I was feeling pretty warm with those quilts, but my head was cold. And I looked at the wall there, and you know it's got these logs, right? And in between the logs, what they done was they put clay called chinking, and that would fill up the holes so that the air couldn't come in. Well, the chinking was gone. The chinking was gone. That air was just a gooshing in on me, and that's why I was so cold. Well, I didn't want to talk it to him. I didn't want to speak it and complain, make me sound like I wasn't a strong boy that could stand a little cold. So I decided I had to do something for myself. So I slipped down my jalousies, and I unbuttoned my breeches, and I slipped those breeches off, got them off my feet, and then I took those breeches and I stuffed them in that big crack. Stuffed it in good and hard there, and that wind was so much better. It felt so much better, and it was warm enough that I could go to sleep then. So I slept all night. The next morning, now you know how it is in the mountains. Most of the mountain people go to bed with the chickens, right? Well, what do they get up with in the morning? The rooster. That's right, the rooster. And we need to hear a rooster crowing any minute now. Let's hear a rooster. Okay. Let's everybody crow. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Well, good for you. Well, everybody in that cabin was awake by that time and stirring about, seeing about fire and all that. And there I was, it felt cold again. And I looked, and my britches was gone out of the crack. Oh my gosh! Oh my heavens! Where could it? Maybe it fell out. And I looked through the crack, and I saw a great big old cow. A great big old cow. And that cow was it was a chewing. By that time, the storm had sort of died down, and it was pretty pleasant outside, and that cow was just a chewing away. Well, what in the world was my jalousies doing hanging out that cow's mouth? And my britches was inside the cow's mouth, and that cow was just a chewing on my britches. Oh my gosh, chewing on my britches like the cow was chewing a cud. Oh my gosh, what was I going to do? I didn't have any other pants to put on. All I had was my long johns, and I'd be embarrassed to get out of bed and running around in my long johns. So I had to think, now, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? So I finally decided to say, "A little lady, oh, little lady, oh, little lady, oh, lady, oh, Lou." You can believe that or not. Well, oh, and if your hands are cold, you can put them together like that if you like the story. If you like the story. If you don't like the story, just sit on them. Well, those were some of the things that was going on when I was growing up. And the thing about the Smokies is how wonderful they were and how much I loved them. I would get out every time I could, and I never had any formal learning. I never had no book learning. But and if you was to see one of my books and try to read it, you'd understand what I'm talking about. You would see, well, if you do try to read it, just sound out the words. That's the way I wrote it. I sounded them out, and then I wrote them down. And also, I didn't put none of that fancy colon and semicolon in that book. Not at all. I just put a period. And that meant just stop and catch your breath and go right on, read right on. Well, so no formal schooling. My life, my kindergarten, my everything was the Smoky Mountains growing up. It really was. I roamed those mountains, and I learned about the mountains. I learned about the rivers. I learned about the animals and the wildflowers and the trees and just everything that I could. That was my life. That was what I was doing. Now, my father, he was a pretty well-known hunter and farmer, tracker, fisherman, and storyteller himself. And so I learned a lot from my father. Henry Coleman was his name. And he often said of me that, Wiley, you were my little brown-eyed Indian boy. That's what he used to say. And so I learned a lot from him. And I learned a whole heap by myself, exploring. Oh, just roaming around in the Smoky Mountains. That's all I ever wanted to do. My father said to me one time, "Wiley, I don't think you're ever going to make much of yourself. Wiley, I turned my back on you, Wiley, and you have took off to the wilderness and gone and exploring. And you don't never work. And Wiley, I'm a little bit worried about you, Wiley, that you just do all that. Instead of going to church on Sunday, you just as soon go out in the woods and look at old trees and follow the tracks of animals." And that's just what I was doing one day. I don't know if it was Sunday or not, but I was following these tracks, and it was a kind of a snowy day, and there were these tracks, and I was seeing where they went and what animal it was and all of that. And I heard somebody chopping in these winter woods, and I saw a little small cabin. And there was a man, an old man, at the door. And the old man had the door wide open, as cold as it was. The door was just wide open, and he was there, and he had his pole axe, and he had these saplings, and he was just chopping away at them, trying to get some wood to put in the fire and try to get it a little bit warm. And he saw me, and he invited me to come on in, and I went in, and we had chatted a little bit. He knew my daddy, and he said I could warm by the fire, and that was all nice and good. And he was a nice old man. And then I went on my way. So I learned from my daddy later that this family in the Smoky Mountains was often considered, well, one of the poorest families in the whole of the Smoky Mountains. They probably never had sold more than $5 at one time, or maybe even just $1 at one time. So I felt a little bad for them. But keeping on about what I'm talking about, a roaming and hunting. If you're hunting, of course, you got to have a gun, right? Well, I learned to shoot with the old-fashioned muzzle loading. They called it a hog rifle, but if you were shooting squirrel, they called it a squirrel rifle. And when I killed my first gobbler turkey, I guess it was called a turkey rifle then. But I was real good with that thing. I was a good shot. And you had to be good because this old kind of gun just had one shot at a time. You're right there. So you got one shot and then you had to reload. So if a wild animal was coming at you, you had to be a real good shot, kabang, to get them, or else you might be dead yourself. And then later on, my daddy got some other weapons like the Winchester rifle he got, 32 caliber. So I enjoyed using the weapons and all, and hunting in the Smokies, and it was just a perfect life for a Smoky Mountain boy like me. I loved it a lot. Well, I guess after a while, all that hunting and all that being in the woods, I'll tell you now the real story about me when I started to hunting. A teenage boy I was, and it was that time that I getting the urges to settle down, maybe find me a gal that I could start courting and maybe settle down with. And it happened in the fall of the year. Now, the fall was one of the best times of the year for the young people to get together, because usually they was living so far apart, and they was usually so busy working they didn't have much time to get together. So at church was a place. But now you could hold your girls' hands as you went up the steps. And when you got to the church, you had to let the hands go, because the girls and the women sat on the left-hand side, and the boys and the men sat on the other side of the church. So you couldn't do much hanky-panky there. So the best time was in the fall when that old sorghum was being processed, and made into molasses. That was a good time. But the time that I had my luck was at the corn shucking time. In the fall, the dry corn would be brought in the husk, put in a big pile, and then the farmer would invite his friends, his neighbors, his kin, whoever wants to come to help him to shuck that corn. And the young people came, and they loved to do this. They'd get there, and they'd sit around that pile of corn, and they would shuck it really fast. And the reason they would shuck it fast is not because they were trying to work hard. It was because if you found a red ear of corn, you got to kiss the person you had your eyes on. So they would shuck that corn as fast as they could. Well, across the way, I noticed a pretty little girl, and I realized that was Rebecca. I knowed her. Most people in the Smokies, we knowed one another, but I'd never really took notice of her till that night. She'd growed up some, and I kept cutting my eyes over at her, and she kept cutting her eyes over at me. And after the shucking was sort of done, and we were sort of wandering around and talking here and there, or going home or whatever, we started moving a little bit closer together and kept looking at each other out the corner of our eyes. And I started to think, well, now this is my chance to start some courting here. The custom in the mountains was called the casting of sheep eyes. And the young people liked it, but the sheep didn't like it so much. But I come prepared that night. I had got me a sheep. I took my barlow knife and I gouged that sheep's eyes out. And then I cast them at Rebecca. You believe me? You're smarter than you look. Really, the way it goes, the casting of sheep eyes means, well, in my case, I looked over at Rebecca, sort of shy like, and I give her the goo-goo eyes. And if the gal likes you back, and Rebecca liked me back, so she casted the sheep eyes over at me and looked at me, and she batted her eyes lashes like she had no seam gnats in them, just a batting those eyes. So that meant the courting was on. Well, the other side of the thing, though, is if you cast your sheep eyes at, say, a gal that did not like you, if you were sweet on her and she thought you was sour, and she didn't like you at all, she would give you a sour look and a mean look in her eyes. And then she would break your leg. Now that don't mean that she actually kicked you and actually sent you to the hospital or nothing. It just meant, it was an expression. It sort of meant that they sort of slowed you down from courting or wanting to court that gal, or you was just sort of out of the race as far as she was concerned. And it rarely meant that, well, buddy, you might as well just call off the hunting dogs because the fox hunt is over. Go home. That's what it meant. Well, Rebecca and me, we wasn't calling things off. We were calling them on. So from the fall there on through the fall into the winter, we into November, December and all, we was courting and going to church together and all that. And finally, we decided we wanted to get married. I think it was around December when I popped the question. She was born December the 25th. And I think that's about when I asked her. And she was 15 years old at. She was close to becoming an old maid because in the mountains, 16, you were considered an old maid. And I was already 19 years old and I was already called an old bachelor. But Rebecca saved me. So we decided to get married in the new year there. And so if you're going to get married, you got to have a marriage license, right? So I got my walking stick out and I walked down to Sevier. I went to the courthouse and I got that little legal piece of paper. Then I started walking back home to Gatlinburg, and I didn't even stop at my daddy's house. I went right on over to the Bud Ogle cabin, and I showed everybody that piece of paper. Oh, I was so proud of that thing. I mean, this was like, we're legal. Oh, this is really happening. We're going to get married. And I was excited. Rebecca, she wasn't quite as excitable as a person as I was, but she was excited that night also. And we was getting sort of antsy standing around that cabin. We wanted to get out. And so we said, it'd be all right if we go out for a little walk. And Ogle said, sure. So we bundled up and we went outside and started walking in the night. And it was a cold night too. But that gave us a good excuse to snuggle up a little bit better, you know. So we was walking and it was a nice bright night. I looked up in the sky and it was a nice moon. It wasn't a full moon. It was big enough to give enough light, but you could still see the stars too. They was just glittering up there in the sky. I said, Rebecca, just think, years from now, after we're married, got a home, got a family, why, we'll be able to look up at that same sky and those stars will be glittering down on us, and that moon will be shining down on us and a blessing our lives. Oh, Rebecca, I want to get married so quick. I want to start our life together. I want us to get a home. I want us to start raising a family and all. Rebecca, let's get married tonight. I know a preacher man. I bet he'll marry us. Come on, Rebecca. What do you say? Should we get married tonight? And she sort of like said, And then she said, all right, Wiley. So we grabbed our hands together. We started walking toward where that preacher lived. Up to the top of the hill. We stopped there. We looked down. The lights was all out. There was nothing burning in that cabin. Just a little bit of smoke coming out the chimney there. But we didn't give up. We walked right down to that cabin door, and we knocked on that door. Well, the preacher inside didn't appreciate it. And he said, who's that a knocking on my door out there? And I said, it's me, Wiley Oakley, out here with Rebecca Ogle. He said, what's wrong, Wiley? Are you hurt? You need some help? Or what's going on? I said, oh, there ain't nothing wrong. It's just Rebecca and me, we'd like to get married. Preacher said, well, when do you allow that you want to get married? I said, we want to get married tonight. Tonight? Wiley, don't you realize that we done took off our clothes, got into bed, covered up the coals in the fireplace, and put the warm rocks at our feet and getting warm, and I'll marry you, but not tonight. See you later. And I said, oh, please, Reverend Carr, you know me. And Rebecca, you know her, what good folks we are. We come to where you're preaching now and then, and we just love one another so much, and we want to get married as soon as possible so that we can start on the road of our lives together, and that we can get us a place to settle down to, and a family to raise and all of that. Oh, could you find it in your heart to please marry us tonight? Well, Wiley, have you got that piece of paper? Yes, sir, I do. I got it right here in my coat pocket. And you got $1? Oh, yes, I got it in my wallet. Well, get them out and put them under the door, Wiley. I will marry you, but I ain't getting dressed. No, sir. I'm going to come to the door, and I'll stand on the inside of the door, and you and Rebecca, you stand on the outside of the door, and I'll marry you that way. And that's the only way I'm going to marry you, and you can just take that offer or leave it. I said, we'll take it. So we was going to get married by an invisible preacher. So Rebecca and me, we stood on the outside the door after I shoved those pieces of paper on the door, and the preacher, he pulled them on out. And he stood on the other side of the door. And he said, all right, join your hands. I said, oh, we're holding hands already. And he started talking about some words of marriage. I wasn't listening real good today, truth. I was just looking at Rebecca, and I was so happy to have that moment happen in our lives. And he went on with it, and finally came down to the part. You are now united in holy matrimony. You are joined. And I said, well, ain't there something else? Oh, yes, you may kiss the bride. So, oh, that was a good kiss. So we went on back to the Ogle cabin. When we got back there, we told the Ogles, and they were not as happy as we were. Ms. Ogle, her name is Lucinda, she was awful disappointed she didn't get to come to the wedding. And Bud Oak, by the way, I called him Mr. Ogle at that time. It took me a while to get to know him well enough to call him Bud. Bud's the name that his brothers give him, and so everybody started calling him Bud. But Mr. Ogle, he said, I just don't know about this. I've never heard about anybody getting married by an invisible preacher. You didn't see the preacher didn't see you. And not only that, Wiley, but you didn't have no witnesses. I don't know if this is legal. I'm worried about it. And I said, oh, wait a minute now. Wait 1 minute. There was a witness. I remember looking over at the window, and I could see the preacher's head, the preacher's wife, that is, her head sticking around the side there, just looking at us and smiling real big. So we did have a witness. In fact, we had 2 witnesses. The other one was behind us in a tree on a limb. Great big old hooty owl up there, big old eyes looking down at us. Who? Why, Wiley and Rebecca, that's who. Well, in thinking about it, though, maybe that old owl wasn't going hooty hoo. Maybe he was going, a little old lady. Woo! And you can believe it or not. And if you like it, put your hands together. There you go. You get the idea. Well, are you ready to hear about a preacher who wasn't invisible? One that actually married us? A true story? That'd be all right. Well, it happened at the Bud Ogle cabin. It really did. And it was a winter's night because we was getting married on, let's see, it was January 19th, 1906 on a Friday. And it was cold outside. There was a little bit of snow on the ground. And it was cold, but inside, when you opened up that door, there was a blazing fireplace. And so it was nice and warm inside. Had a few lanterns around to see what was going on. And so the gathering, the family, and we had 2 witnesses that night, and not a single one of them was an owl. Can you imagine that? And so the smell of food was in that room because that's where they've been doing their cooking. And so we were all getting there, and we heard the knock on the door, and it was the preacher. He'd come right on the dot, just when I asked him to come. So he came on inside, and we all mingled a little bit, and then finally was about ready to have that wedding. And it was going to be a simple wedding, of course, you know, in the mountains and all, in the dead of winter and all. Nothing fancy to it. No flower girl. No, what's they called? The ring boy. None of that. We didn't even have a ring that night. That come later. I took a silver dime and I hollered it out real good, you know. And that was the ring that Rebecca wore. And here it is right here. This is the ring that I hollered out for Rebecca. So we had everything going. It was simple. We didn't have no bouquets of flowers because it was the wintertime, you know. And so when everything was ready, the preacher said, we'll get started. And he stood up with his back to the fireplace. But he did not stay there long because it was hot and it was burning his britches. Oh, he got out from there and he got on one side of the fireplace, and Rebecca and me, we stood on the other side of the fireplace. And he told us to join our hands, which we did, and we was looking at him some, and mostly looking at one another. And I was just staring at Rebecca. Now she had on her best Sunday go to meeting dress, and I had on my best Sunday go to meeting suit, and I even had a tie on. Yes, indeed. So we was getting ready to get married. And mostly I was looking in her eyes. She had pretty blue eyes. My daddy had blue eyes. Most of his kin did. I had brown. And just staring at her, how pretty she was, that blonde hair of hers. And come to think of it, I believe she had a little sprig of something in her hair. Probably was, you know, something like a holly with the red berries. Had it in her hair, and it made her prettier than she already was. So we were looking at one another, and the preacher started the ceremony. We are gathered here, and Wiley and Rebecca and something or other. I wasn't listening too much again, and he kept on talking, and I kept on looking at Rebecca, and looking at Rebecca, and then finally got to the part of, well, do you, and we did, and then he finally got down to the end of it where, and I now pronounce you husband and wife. And he didn't forget. Now you may kiss your bride. Mwah! Ah! So we got married that night. There was back patting after that and handshaking. And then we sat down at the table to have something to eat. And the Ogle said, killed a rooster and a hen and we had some good old chicken and dumplings and corn pone to shove it around a little bit with. And we had leather breeches beans. Anybody know what leather breeches beans is? She doesn't. She does. Leather breeches beans, in case you don't know. In the summertime, of course, you grow your beans in the long pods and all. Well, you take them and you string them up, put them on a nice strong string, have a long string of them, and then you hang them somewhere to dry. It might be on the porch, it might be in the smokehouse, somewheres. Other people do it other ways, but that's one way to do it. And then they dry out. And then you store them in a flour sack for the wintertime when you ain't got nothing green to eat in the garden, or you don't have a garden. And you take those beans, you soak them overnight, and cut them up, some do, and then you boil them. You boil them and you boil them, and you put a little fat back in it. Then you got leather breeches beans. The reason they call them leather breeches beans is when they're hanging up there drying like that, those pods look sort of like pants legs, sort of like breeches legs. So they call them leather breeches beans. So we had leather breeches beans, we had fruits, we had apple pie, all sorts of good things to eat, and it was awful good. And when it was over, the preacher was needing to get home, so I took him off to the corner. I said, all right, preacher, Reverend Carr, what do I owe you? He said, $1. What does charge everybody, $1. So I give him the $1. I handed it to him, and then he took his hand and he put it on my shoulder. He said, Wiley, I'm going to do something for you. I've known you a long time when you was a boy and you lived close to me and you was honest. You was a good boy, never caused no trouble. And Wiley, I'm going to tell you this for sure. Getting married and getting settled down, it ain't easy. It ain't easy at all. It's a tough road to hoe sometimes. So Wiley, I'm going to give you your $1 back. And here's another one to go with it. And Wiley and Rebecca, I wish you the best. I give you my blessings. I give you my wishes for a good life together. That was such a nice thing for that man to do. I'll never forget that preacher for that. So we had gotten married that night. Well, where was we going to stay? Well, about a quarter mile behind the Bud Ogle cabin going towards the mill, there was something called a wiener cabin. A wiener cabin. Used to be a hot dog stand. You don't believe that, do you? It meant that a couple could live in that wiener cabin until they could get settled down and have a place of their own, and then that would wean them off to their own place later on. So that's where we spent the night, and that's all you need to know. Well, it was winter, but whenever the weather allowed, we was going to go to the place where we was going to live. My oldest brother, his name was Harvey Henderson Oakley. His son, by the way, his grandson was Fred, the one that drove me up the hill there. And he had a place about 6-8 miles from Gatlinburg. It was the farthest along cabin that there was at that time. He had about 300 acres of land around that thing, 100 acres cleared around it. Nearest neighbor was 2 miles. So it was isolated, just the way I like it. Way out there, all that peace and quiet, I couldn't wait to get there. So we gathered up a few things that we had, and it was just going to be the two of us. We didn't have no cart or nothing to carry us. We had to walk. So we set out going towards Scratch Britches Mountain. This is where we was going to start our life. And it was not an easy walk neither, because there was trees down in that pathway, because it was not a trail that many people went down, it's so far away and all. And there was little creeks we had to cross, and there was a rhododendron thickets we had to go through. So it was not an easy walk to our place, and we had lots of time to think and to talk and think about the future. What's down the road for Wiley and Rebecca? What's going to happen? Of course, we didn't know. Nobody knows. We didn't know we was going to have 12 children. If Rebecca knew that, she might have said goodbye and go back to her daddy. And we didn't know that I was going to one day be a guide who guided some pretty well-known people and all. I guided President Roosevelt. I guided Henry Ford, the auto man. Rockefeller Jr. I guided Eddie Arnold. Now, that man could really yodel. I didn't say nothing around him. And also Kate Smith. You know her, that singer from way back when? She went up to the wooden tower that was at Klingman's Dome, and she sang, "When the moon comes over the mountain." A lot better than that. So all these people were coming into my life. I had no idea that was going to happen. I had no idea that one day that the park was going to give me a badge. Their very first badge to me, calling me the #1 guide in the Smoky Mountains. I didn't know about that coming up. I didn't know that we was going to move after 20 years there to Gatlinburg, open up a shop called the Wiley Shop. And we had a sign out front that said, "Antiques made to order." And we didn't know that was going to happen. And the thing that I guess really sort of, how could we have ever imagined that one day, 34 years after we was married, that President Franklin D. Roosevelt would go up the Newfound Gap and dedicate the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on September the 2nd, 1940. And that was, well, just coincidentally, that was 10 days before my 55th birthday when all that happened. We had no idea that anything like that was ahead of us in our lives. We just know that it was a long walk, and we were sort of tired by that time. And we know that we loved one another and was going to make a good life together. So we got to Scratch Britches Mountain, opened up the cabin door, and that thing was empty. There wasn't nothing in there but spider webs and dust. So that means I had to get busy making things for the cabin. There was a sawmill a mile away, owned by Andy Huff, the man that started the Mountain View Hotel. And he said that I could have any kind of lumber I wanted, just go ahead and get it. And I did. And I started making things. My dad had given me a pole axe and he'd give me a saw. And so I used those tools and I built what we needed. I built a bed. We needed a bed awful bad. And we, at some point, got a corn shuck mattress for that bed, which sort of makes sense. You know, we started courting at a corn shucking, and then we started sparking on a corn shuck mattress. So I made everything I needed, kitchen appliances, like spoons and a bread tray and all that kind of stuff. And so we were setting up our life. We had lots of food, of course. The woods around us had all this wild game that we could kill and eat, and plants that were edible in the woods there and all. So we were setting up a pretty good life up there in the Smoky Mountains. And my daddy had taught me how to find the wild bees and the wild bee honey in the woods. And he had sent some with me when we went on our honeymoon there. And so on our honeymoon, we had honey and more honey. And it was good. But you know, I guess you probably all know this. Honeymoons don't never last forever. Right? Can I get an amen to that? Amen. That's right. Well, same thing happened with Rebecca and me one time. Oh, we had some words. And I don't remember whether it was a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Must have been a little while after we was there because we had a cow barn by that time. But one day, Rebecca said something to me that just didn't sound good to me. And I said, well, if you're going to talk to me that way, I'm going to get my hat and I'm going down to my dad's in Gatlinburg, and you can go to wherever you want to. So I went to the door and I got my hat on my head and I turned back and I looked at her, and she had this peculiar look on her face, and she said, Wiley, maybe you ought to give me a lock of your hair before you go leaving me up here in these mountains all by myself. And that just made me a little bit madder. So I decided to go right on. So I walked on down the trail there, and the trail went right by the cow barn that we had. We had to have a cow barn because we had cows by that time, and we had to keep them penned up at night because the bears would try to get in. The bears was so thick in the mountains. So as I was getting down there close to that cow barn, I was thinking to myself, Wiley, you know, that was a mighty few words to leave that girl up here in the mountains all by herself. Maybe I ought to at least stick around and see her out. So I decided that I would duck in behind the barn there and wait. So I got behind the barn and I waited back there, and it was quiet. And I thought I'd just wait back there until I could hear her footsteps on the pathway. So I waited and I waited and I waited, and I didn't hear no footsteps coming down the pathway. And I know there wasn't no other way out. But I kept on waiting and listening, and I never did hear nobody coming. And I was getting tired of waiting. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just walk over and I might peep around the corner of the cow barn and see if that woman is making any effort to come out. So I walked over and I peeped around the corner, and there was Rebecca standing at the back door. And she said, Wiley, why don't you come on back? And I said, I don't care if I do. I was just waiting for her to ask me. So I went on back, and I've been with her ever since. Well, I was a guiding a lot of people those days and throughout my life, and sometimes they'd be young married couples, and I'd give them a little bit of advice. I'd say, there's going to be words at some point, and you must never pass up the cow barn. You must stop and think it over. Um, it worked with me, and it just might work for you. So don't pass up the cow barn. Might save a lot of trouble. And there was old people that I'd hike too. A few of you qualify for that. And I'd say, now, you might take some of this too. And do not ever pass up the cow barn. And if you ain't got a barn, it might pay you to build one. Might save a lot of trouble. And that's a story called The Cow Barn. Thank you. Well, we lived on there in the Smokies at Scratch Bridges Mountain. We lived in a number of different places while we was there, and we had a good life there, and lots of good memories of those 20 years in the Smoky Mountains before we moved to Gatlinburg. One thing I remember that was not so much fun at Scratch Bridges Mountain. One night we hear these rattlesnakes under the floorboards in the kitchen, just rattling away. Well, we didn't like it either, so we vacated. We left and we moved across the branch from where my father lived, Oakley Branch, and then it flooded there, so we moved back to Scratch Bridges later, and then we moved to Bullhead one time. Oh, had another fire at Bullhead. And the people, they all said they had never seen such a fire in their lives, that it was the worst wildfire that had been in the mountains. Like none of them could remember anything worse than that. The fire was jumping from mountain to mountain to mountain. Oh, and things was getting burned up all around. I had to throw water on the roof there to keep the sparks from catching my cabin on fire, and it was just awful. I hope that nothing like that ever happens to you in your lives. Well, we was all praying for rain. And it didn't look hopeful because it had been so dry and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. But we was all just praying for rain. And then the rain started coming. And about midnight, I went outside and I looked all around, and there didn't seem to be no sparks of burning anywhere. The rain had about put it out. And then there was a rainbow at night like that. Rebecca, come on out here and look at this here rainbow. Well, we just couldn't believe our eyes. Whew. And that was a tough time for us in living at Old Bullhead. We lost a kid. Our first child lost was at Painter Branch. His name was Reuben. And then while we was there, Old Death came knocking at our door again. Early one morning, I didn't want to get up. And I didn't want to open the door to a stranger, didn't know who it was. But they kept on knocking and knocking, and I got up and I peeked around to see who it was. I could see it was a young girl. So finally I opened up the door. And she said, Mr. Wiley. And it was a young teenage girl. She had long hair the way the women wore the hair back then. And it was sort of plastered on her face because she had been crying. She was still crying a little bit. She said, Mr. Wiley, can you help us out? My daddy died last night. It was that old man that I saw chopping that wood, that poor family in the mountains that night. He was my nearest neighbor 2 miles away. I told her, of course, I'll be right there as soon as I can do a few things. I'll be there to help out any way I can. So I went to where they lived, and there's 2 things that need to be done. We need to dig a hole in the ground for the grave, and we need to build a coffin for the old man. So I got me a grubbing hoe and a shovel, and first of all, we measured the man to see how long he was, so we'd know how big to make that hole, allowing a little bit extra for the coffin and all. So the 2 of the man and I went on down. Well, not down, we went up to a little hillside graveyard. That's where his wife and a few children were built, but you wouldn't know who was there because they did not have any engraving. They didn't have any writing on any stones or nothing like that. So we started digging away, and then another man come up and he said, Mr. Wiley, we hear you're pretty good at building things. Can you help us build a coffin? So I went up there, and there was another guy that worked with me, and we got these boards out of the stable there, and they were big old, thick, long boards that he was going to use for flooring, and we were going to make a coffin out of those. So we got our hammer, and we got saw, and we got some nails, and we started working on that. Neither one of us knowed what we was doing. We'd never made a coffin before, but we nailed that thing together, doing the best we could with what we had. And I would say that it was just a box. It was well nailed together, but just a box. And some others had come up from the Gatlinburg area, and they had brought cloth to put on the outside, and they'd brought some cotton batting to put on the inside of the coffin, and then some white cambric cloth to put over that, had some tacks to tack it in. When all that was done, they brought the man out, and they laid him in that coffin there, and then we put the top on it, and then we started hammering it closed, and then we took that coffin up the hill to the little graveyard that had clay and all in it, and we lowered the man into the ground there and covered him up after a few words, and there lay the man under the sod and dew. I was a young man at that time, no more than 20 or 21. And but there's no doubt in my mind that that old man was resting in peace now. He was all his sorrows and all his sadness, they had vanished by that time, and he had seen the light of a new world. Now, that old man, he probably didn't realize that his life was as bad as everybody else thought it was, that he was doing all right, living. But if I had it to say, I'd say that that old man, with the burden of his life and trying to survive and living up there in the mountains the way he was, that he was doing nothing more than breathing. But God bless that old man, and goodbye to you. So there's death in the Smokies, and there's also fun, and there's also the hunting. And if you got just a little bit more time, we're running late, I'm so sorry. But I'd like to tell you one more quick hunting story about a bobcat. I was out hunting one night. I came home and the door to the cabin was locked, closed. I couldn't get in. Rebecca had shoved stuff up against the door and she had to move it. I came in. She said, "Oh, Wiley, you should have been here 2 hours ago. There was something on the roof. It was clawing. It was just up there, just terrible." And I was so scared. And I didn't blame her. Well, I went out and I sicked the dog on the scent of that animal. And the dog started chasing that scent. Went up the mountain. Pretty soon I could hear the dog barking away. Well, I followed the sound and I got there. He had treed a bobcat, big old bobcat, up in that tree. And first thing I did was, "Come on, boy. Come on, Blue. Come over here. Come on over here. Right now. Come on, boy. Come on." Because I didn't want that bobcat to jump down on my dog and kill it, you know. Because it's not a good thing to try to hunt a bobcat in a tree with a dog. I decided I was going to have to set out some traps. So I did. I set them around here and there. I baited them with rabbits. Pretty soon I caught that old bobcat. I sure did. And skinned him out and all. I think it's probably the biggest bobcat that had been around in that area. And I used the skin to throw on the cat at times. Woo! And that cat would jump. Oh, boy, she was so scared of that skin. A fella came along, he wanted to swap it. He gave me a razor for that bobcat skin. That razor wouldn't cut butter. But it didn't matter because I didn't have a beard at that time. But anyway, Rebecca made sure that after that, before she let me out of the cabin at night to go hunting, that I made that door secure with latches and with buttons. You may not know what a button is, but you know what it's sort of like a button, or it could be a knob, or it could be an old empty thread spool, you know. And then you had a piece of leather or something with a hole in it that would fit over that thing, and that's called a button on the door. And she made me put them up one side and down the other to secure herself before I could go at night. She wanted to make sure that the devil himself could not get in that door. So that's a little bit of life. Oh, at Scratch Britches Mountain in the Smoky Mountains. Oh, I'm going up to the mountains where the bobcat stays. And when night comes on, that bobcats are gonna come around. Oh, yes, that bobcats are gonna come around. And they'll scream so loud that the hair raise on your head. Hi, old lady, old lady, old lady, old lady. Well, let me tell you right now, I got a body as brave as any man. Yes, I got a body as brave as any man. But when that bobcat comes around, ooh, my legs won't stand. Hi, old lady, yeah, lady, old lady. Oh, I'm not gonna make love. Oh, I ain't gonna love him. No bobcat, no kind of stinging bee. For once the bobcat got after me. And I run so fast that I run my head in a big hornet's nest. And those hornets stung my head until it was so sore that I had to send and buy out the whole drugstore. Hi, old lady, yeah, lady, old lady. Well, I wrote one more verse for my wife, the golden-haired bride of Scratch Britches Mountain. Oh, I'm not gonna make love to no bobcat, no kind of bumblebee. No, I'm gonna make love to some pretty girl whose eyes shine like diamonds, and her hair looks like gold. Now, her nose may be a little bit crooked, but it'll only match her toes. Oh, I'm gonna love her everywhere she goes. Oh, lady, oh, lady, yeah, lady, oh, lady. Great Granny, that's the Bobcat song. We're going to have to clear out of here pretty soon, but I'd like to say one more thing. After that time, I thought I heard Fred coming back up. You probably heard that yodeling going on. And I want to say one thing about what my daddy said early on about me not, never being worth much. And there's a lot of truth in it, because, well, I didn't have much money, that's for sure. I was never a rich man. And I had never had a fine home, a grand kind of a thing to live in. I never had an automobile to drive around, and I never had a lot of good. I never ran for no office either. I run away from any kind of political thing. I sure did run to the mountain. And I was never the kind of husband and father that a lot of people thought I should be. Didn't mean I didn't love them. But I was always running off somewhere, off to the woods. It was just my nature. And I guess you could say that, well, I was just being me. I mean, I don't know what else you can do but be yourself, and I think I was being who I was intended to be. Wiley Oakley, Roamin man of the mountains. Thank you for coming tonight. Can they take a couple questions? We got a few minutes. You need to clear out the library.
Very soon, yes. If anybody has a couple of questions.
Does anybody have a question? A quickie question?
Yes, Planet does that. AT has a couple of questions, folks.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Hey, Mary, what you got to say?
I heard that Henry Ford once gave you some advice.
He did. And he gave me some money along with that advice. It was just a whole handful of money. I'd never seen that much money at one time. And he said, Wiley, now use this money wisely. That's right. Don't buy an automobile. That's what he told me. He sure did. Anybody else? Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed yourself. And come on back to the Annaporta Library. If you want a book, right over there. And I'd love to have some of the Oakley family over there to say howdy to people and answer any questions they might have. I love seeing your face. It was so happy. Hi there.
Hi.
Good to see you. Are you a man this? Thank you.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
Fun
Thank
job,
you.
as always.
And there's some change in there if you need it. These are free if you buy one of these two books. One's $5 and